Hey everyone, Tom Henderson, the founder of RESGEN here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast, where we hear stories and have conversations about life in Christ, integrating our faith into every area of our life in ways that we as men can give life to others, at home, at work, and in the community. Joining me for today's episode is a good friend of mine named Matt Paulson. Matt is a husband, father, entrepreneur, business owner, and philanthropist who is driven to not only be successful himself, but help others be successful as well. On today's show, Matt and I talk about a number of topics, including what makes and or breaks a startup, how he personally has handled entrepreneurial failures and disappointments, and how his faith and relationship with Jesus has guided his journey in business, as a leader in the community, and as a husband and father. We also talk about having a spirit of generosity and some of the guidelines that he has personally put in place to help him that may in turn help you decide not just what he gives to, but how he stewards his time, talent, and treasure overall. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. Here's my conversation with Matt Paulson. Matt Paulson, it's good to, it's good to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be back at the seminary.
Yeah, you say back because, and this is all part of, we're going to unpack a lot today, but you just actually came off the board of directors here at the seminary after how many years?
I was on the board for 8, and that was after being a student for 3.
Right, and so when I said, hey, ResGen officers at the seminary, I didn't have to give you any instructions because you knew where you were coming. So, all right, well, hey, we're going to get into a lot of stuff today, and so appreciate you taking some time to do this with me. And we've had a lot of conversations. You and I, we've multiple conversations, lunches, all that, but we've never had the conversations recorded. And so I'm excited to be able to have other people listen in on our convo today. Mm-hmm. But before we get into all that, just for those that may not know who Matt Paulson is, mm-hmm. I gave a little bit of an intro of who you are, okay. Kind of in the introduction of the pod. But just tell a little bit about who you are, your family, married, kids, all that kind of stuff, and we'll get into it.
Yeah. So, we all have all these different identities, right? You have your family identity, you have your kind of church, religious identity, and then you've kind of got your career identity. So I'm a Christian, have been for many, many years. I think I got baptized as an adult in 2006 at West Center Baptist Church in Madison, South Dakota.
Okay.
I met my wife, Corrine, in 2008 at Central Baptist Church in Sioux Falls. So right after college, met her, dated for a few years, got married in 2011, had Micah in 2012, and our daughter Addie in 2016. She has a rare genetic condition, so that makes life interesting for us. Mm-hmm. And then on the business side, I've been pretty successful over the years. I run a large financial media company. We have 3.6 million people on our email list.
Wow.
And then I kind of have some hobby businesses as well. So I have a venture capital fund that I started last year with a partner. And then I do some real estate investing with a different partner as well. So
yeah,
got a lot going on. Get to do a lot of fun things and I'm able to do a lot of other things for other people as a result as well.
Right, and that's one of the coolest things, man. I was trying to think. I think you and I have known each other for well over 10 years now.
Sure. We had more hair back then, definitely.
Yeah, well, I did for sure. The recession on mine is definitely getting stronger. But so we've had, we've been connected. One thing that I even said in the introduction was just that not only have you always wanted to be successful yourself, but it's to help others be successful as well. Mm-hmm. And so, which I think is just one of the greatest attributes about you. But even before we get into that, one of the things that I just love that you began with is so often as men, I think a lot of times we lead with what we do, right? We lead with our career, with what we've accomplished, all that kind of stuff. But I think it's so key, and I don't want people to miss this, is right out of the box, you said, okay, number one, I'm a Christian, okay? Yeah. I'm a follower of Christ. That's where my identity is found. And then, so I'm a follower of Jesus, I'm a husband to Corrine, I'm a dad to my 2 kids, and oh, by the way, I also have some business things that I do on the side. And I think that's such an important perspective for us to keep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are parts about us that tend not to change, and then there are parts about us that do change. And everybody sells a business at some point, whether you get an offer or it fails, or somebody or you die and the business shuts down, like you're going to sell it at some point, and that part of you is going to change. But hopefully your relationship with your spouse and your kids and your faith relationship, hopefully those things don't change. So it's important to think of your identity in terms of, who am I first? That is who I am forever. And then what are the things that kind of come and go over the years? Like I was a seminary board member and now I'm not. And if my identity was tied up in that, then I would feel a pretty great loss by saying I was that, but now I'm not, and that hurts.
Oh man, dude, that is so good. I mean, usually like nuggets like that come in a segment at the end called the final word. You're like dropping that. That's like a drop the mic right at the beginning. So I love that. So it actually makes me think a little bit about what you wrote in a recent newsletter. So you going to give some quarterly updates on business, but also just what's going on personally and as a family and all of that. And there was a paragraph in your most recent quarterly newsletter that you wrote about how you've kind of gotten into watching these YouTube videos of this guy and how he's been like showing malls that have been around for, 100 years or whatever. But that while there was a great fanfare when the mall opened up, now they're showing like video of that same mall.
It's basically dead.
That's basically dead.
Yeah.
And that's got you really kind of even thinking more introspectively just about like where you're at and how that whole idea of, everything does die.
Yeah.
There is a cycle. There is a season to things. And so how do we focus on what's important?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my family and I, we drove over to Wisconsin Dells over the weekend, and we stopped in Albert Lee, and there was a mall that had a pizza ranch in there. So we stopped for lunch, and it was just about as dead as you can get, or still being open. Like you could see where the Sears used to be and all that stuff. And then, but I also think like, we were around in the early 90s, kind of when in late 80s, when malls kind of peaked and were just like the hottest thing. And like, it is amazing how that cycle has come and gone within our lifetimes. And then you kind of realize like, this was a big business idea that probably cost, a mall is $50 to $100 million to build a good one. And somebody put so much money into that, and it came and went, and now it's gone. And like everything that I build, like my, Market Beat and Homegrown Capital, like, they're really successful right now, but someday like nobody will ever remember those things. And it's important to kind of hold on to these things lightly, because at some point they're going to be gone, whether, you sell them or they just die or whatever. So you got to be really careful again about how much your identity gets wrapped up in these things, because they will be gone at some point. And, you got to understand what's really important and what's kind of a secondary important. And I really try to keep all of the business stuff as an item of secondary importance.
Yeah. Well, and Scripture even talks about that, right? Like how this earth is not our home, but it's very easy to say, man, we're going to put all of our eggs in this basket. But even though it may seem like we're here for a long time, it is such a short amount of time in the whole scheme of eternity.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of, and I mean, you have kids, I have two boys, as you know them, and they're in college now. And there were days where we were talking before we recorded about how just summer is sometimes difficult with younger children, because it's like, how do you entertain them all day? How do you keep them, keep everybody from going crazy and whatever. And so the statements of, the days are long, but the years are short. And having two boys now that are going off to college and going, man, I remember there were days where I was pulling my hair out, not helping my hairline, because they were driving me crazy. But now I'm like, wow, that really went fast. And that's life too. Yeah. Just life in general goes so dang fast.
Yeah. You go through the kind of daily rhythms of life, and then you wake up 10 years later and like, oh, I'm 37, not 27. Right. When did that happen?
Exactly. So let me ask you then, Matt, because, I think that, like you just said, there's seasons where these things, we become more aware of these types of thoughts, right? And so, if, the success that you've been able to achieve over the years, like when you look at even some of the awards that you've been given, like this one I thought the top 30 startup gurus of 2019, first of all, I've never been called a guru on anything, but you're in this,
not something you want to be called,
the global guru or whatever. But, and Market was recognized as one of the best entrepreneurial companies in America in 2019 as well. So what was the drive? Like, where did the drive for success for yourself, MarketBeat come from, especially in its infancy?
Yeah, so I kind of woke up one day as a freshman and sophomore in college at Dakota State University, had more and more student loan debt every semester. Like, I think I had maybe $100 a month in spending money, and just like, I was tired of being broke and poor, and like figured like I got to like turn things around and figure out ways to make some more money just to not graduate with a bunch of student loan debt and just not even be able to afford to go to McDonald's for lunch. So I thought, okay, I'm going to learn every way there is to make money on campus and do all of the ones that I can and just not have any free time. And like, that's my plan. So I wrote for the campus newspaper, applied to do that, got hired because nobody else wanted the job. I did tutoring for like 6-7 hours a week, and I did IT work on campus, got a technology fellowship, which was a pretty sweet gig. So I kind of put some work together, figured out that, writing is a skill that I have and am growing in. And then I thought, well, I've kind of capped out the number of jobs I can take on campus, because at that point, like, people say, you're already working 3 on-campus jobs. How do you have time for another one?
Yeah.
So I've figured out you could get paid to write as a freelance writer on the internet. There's a site called the Pro Blogger Job Board. So I would write different personal finance articles and get paid $20 or $30 an article, which a college student in 2006, 2007, that was pretty good money.
Yeah.
And then that led me to create my own personal finance blog, which went well. 2008 was the first full year that I did that. I made like $55,000 or something like that. And I thought, well, maybe I could do 4 more of these and have different people write for them and pay them as writers. And that went well. And then there was an investing blog in there somewhere. And then that site really took off, and rebranded it a couple of times. And now it's MarketBeat.
Yeah.
Which is a big, successful financial media company.
Yeah. And which has been around for how many years?
So we've had the MarketBeat name since 2015 and the business model since about 2011.
Yeah. So if you really look at kind of the initial drive for success, it was like, okay, I just need to find ways to generate some more income. I'm a poor college student,
yep.
And I need to take some initiative.
Mm-hmm.
Were you tempted at a point to because your parents aren't entrepreneurs?
No, they're very blue collar. My mom worked at Walmart. My dad was a police officer. So I didn't really grow up in an entrepreneurial environment.
Yeah.
It was more, I decided every opportunity that was going to come along, I was going to take. And then I would just keep looking for that next opportunity that would kind of move just a little bit further up the scale. And, here we are 16 years into it, and it's gone pretty well.
So you made the comment, Matt, about how and the word you used was, I wasn't a very remarkable,
mm-hmm.
Teenager or in high school and first part of college and whatever.
Yeah.
But yet you had, and so, we all have kind of our definition of what a remarkable teen would be like, but somehow you gained some confidence
mm-hmm.
to where, in the middle of your college career, you're like, hey, I'm just going to get after this stuff. And how has God wired me? How has God gifted me? And let's explore those gifts. And you've grown in that confidence ever since. So did you have people that came alongside you that helped grow that confidence? Was it just by trying new stuff and seeing it work, or?
Yeah, I would say it's probably a mix of both of those things. So, when you do something and it works out well, that gives you some confidence to do the next thing. I also had some just fantastic college professors that really poured into me and gave me way more time than they should have. Up at DSU, Josh Paulai, the late Wayne Paulai, Tom Halverson, a guy named Steve Graham, who's also since passed away. Those guys really invested in me as a student, and I don't know what they saw in me, but when you just kind of wander in a professor's office and they give you an hour of their time when you're not in their calendar, they obviously don't have to do that, but they did it over and over again, and I just got some fantastic mentorship as a result. And one of them gave me a job doing website development. And I really didn't, had no business having, is because I didn't really have any experience, but I kind of figured it out and mumbled my way through it. And, that was a great time. That kind of gave me some confidence in I can build a website that is not garbage and somebody might pay me to do that. So
yeah,
that job kind of instilled some more confidence in me as well.
Your experience with them and through college, and you you speak very highly of them.
Mm-hmm.
Did that shape the way that you think about just people that are coming behind you or that you work with? Are those kind of also just mentors in that way?
I'd say yes. There's such a wide spectrum of what mentorship is. And I feel like the most effective mentorship is when you find somebody, say 5-10 years younger than you on the same kind of path that you are, and you can really just spend a lot of time with them and, not have a formal mentorship session where we meet once a quarter and talk about business and life. I think those artificial things don't always stick around and they don't always last very long. But when you kind of have a long-term kind of friendship with somebody who is kind of, the Jonathan and David relationship, that you can just kind of be there with, and then when something comes up, you're there to talk to them. I probably have 3 or 4 of those guys in my life, and I really pour into them, and they, encourage me in other ways as well. And, this has been really good relationships. Some of the formal stuff I've tried before hasn't just panned out the best, because then you end up with some kind of the wrong people seeking mentorship, or they're looking for something in a mentor relationship that a mentorship relationship can't create. So you got to kind of be mindful about what mentorship is and who you're trying to mentor and what that format looks like. But if you do it right, it can be very rewarding for, both the mentor and the mentee.
Right.
It's the more transactional stuff that falls apart.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's good and that's helpful. So I do want to, and I want to talk more on some more personal end stuff, but I do want to say, because you are a wealth of knowledge, and you've been very, very good, especially for the entrepreneurial, the startup community. We have a thriving startup, just really, for lack of better words, a culture and a community in Sioux Falls.
Yes.
That you've invested heavily in, that you are very passionate about. You've been a part of creating startups, investing in startups. And so what are a couple things that's just these things, or their principles or characteristics or whatever, really make or break a startup?
Yeah. That's
other things?
Sure.
Is that too broad of a question?
I think a lot of it, so much of it depends on who the founder is, and are they focused on the right things? And then is it actually a good idea? And you'd be surprised how many times the answer is just no, objectively no. So it's, is it somebody who is willing to learn, somebody who is coachable, somebody who is able to kind of figure things out on their own without being kind of fed step by step what to do. So you have these events, and Thad knows this better than anybody. A ton of people show up, and out of that 50 people that show up, 4 of them might have what it takes. So then you kind of identify who those people are, and then you say, okay, you're working on this. I think this person can help you. Why don't you go meet with them? Or you need money for this. That's probably a SBA 504 loan. You should go talk to this person here. And, if they take the advice, you can be really helpful to them. But then there's also kind of the, when you think of success as a pyramid where at the top, there's very few super successful people, and it's a very wide base. So sometimes you get people who just kind of like to hang out, or they maybe want to, or an insurance person that wants to sell to entrepreneurs. So you get a lot of that. It's really identifying the people who have what it takes, and then being there for them to help them accelerate their success. And the reality is they're probably going to make it whether you're there or not, but you can, if you show up at the right time in the right moment and help in the right way, you can really help somebody kind of take a couple jumps in their level of success. And that's kind of what I've always looked for at Startups Sioux Falls, is finding the diamonds in there and investing in those people.
Yeah. So there's a couple things you said there. One, I love the statement of, is it a good idea? Is this startup company, is it something? And then, are you the right person to lead it? And I think one of the words that you said there that I think is so important is coachable.
Yeah.
Is the person coachable? Because at the end of the day, we're all to be lifelong learners, and we're all to bring everything we have to the table, but then say, okay, what needs to be pruned off? What needs to be added to? And then how do we continue to move forward? Because it's not just about a growth of a company, it's growth as an individual. And how are we growing? And then in turn, how are we helping growing those that we are connected with? Whether that's people that are in our business, or people that our business is trying to impact. Because, as you know, the world's built on relationships and people.
And I think one thing you brought a great point about pruning. And I think like as you kind of climb that ladder of success, you just get so many more opportunities thrown your way in terms of, hey, do you want to come speak at this thing? Do you want to be on this podcast? Do you want to come to this event? Do you want to start this business with me? Do you want to be on this board of directors for something? And, you just kind of collect all these things and throw them in your backpack. And then you realize like, oh, my backpack is weighing me down. I got to like look through this and get rid of some of this stuff. So, it is very important as you kind of climb the success ladder to say, okay, what are my commitments? And like, should the thing that I signed up for 5 years ago, should that still be a commitment today? And, oftentimes the answer is no. And by clearing the plate, so to speak, you create a lot of new opportunity for bigger and more impactful things in your life.
Yeah. And different things and sometimes there's seasons where it's like, man, I just need to unpack everything. And just because I really need to, fully invest all myself in, especially as a dad with young kids and a wife, figuring out, okay, man, I want to make sure that I'm not growing my business and not growing my family.
Yeah.
And of course, obviously growing our relationship with Christ as well. So, Matt, I'm sure that you've had times where there's been maybe some disappointments, some failures, for lack of better words, some experiences like that. So, how have you personally handled failures or disappointments?
Yeah. I think it happens to everybody that's in business. Like, of all the things that I try to grow a market, maybe 1 out of 10 will actually make an impact. So you do so many things and like you recognize that like, well, it's probably not going to work, but I'll try it and see what happens. And over time, like eventually I've become immune to a lot of stuff not working out because, it's really more about the volume of activity and like identifying of all the things you do, like what's working and then doubling down on that. So as long as like something's working, it's usually pretty manageable. It's like when nothing is working, nothing seems to be going right. And, honestly, like about 12 months ago, like the stock market had really taken a dip and like no matter what we do, we couldn't grow the business. We were down, I think, top line revenue 15% last year, despite like trying all this stuff to grow and just like, oh man, nothing's going right. But, at the same time, like kids are healthy, spouse is healthy, got a dog, got a pool and backyard. Like life's pretty good. So
sure.
For me, it's really focusing on kind of the core and like, yeah, it's like market might kind of suck this year, but got a lot of other good things in life too. I mean, there are people that have it much, much worse.
Sure.
So this morning, we were at work and it's like, oh, we should order McDonald's breakfast just because we can and it sounds good. So a lady, like the DoorDash driver comes, she, has an old beat up car. She has her kid with her in a car and just like, oh man, I'm pretty sure the kid had Down syndrome. It's like, I could have life just so much worse than I have it today and be thankful for kind of, we have issues like every family does, but like we could have it much worse, and just recognizing everything we've been blessed with makes it a lot easier to stomach kind of the, project failures that just happen.
Sure. So, and I think one of the things that men, again, I wouldn't say humans, but I think I talk about with men about is just that fear of failure. And obviously, you don't fear failure near as much as if you have had a number of successes underneath your belt, right? I think so. It's easier to throw a little bit more caution to the wind if you've got some pretty decent successes. But in the early goings on, how did you get beyond like just the fear of failure? I know that for me, even like in my marriage, because of growing up in a home that had some challenges, a broken home, and all of that, I was fearful for a while of getting married. And so could my marriage withstand life and be successful? And so like I had to get beyond that fear, believe in, no, you know what? I can get married and God can, completely change our lives, be the foundation of our marriage, whatever. So when you first started trying to like get these things started, how did you get beyond that kind of that fear of failure mindset, or did that not really affect you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I was worried about was like trying something and then having it fall on its face, and then like having maybe peers or other students or whoever like make fun, like, oh, you tried that. That was never going to work. You shouldn't have that. That was dumb. Why did you do that? Like,
Yeah.
that's kind of what I wanted to avoid. So I just didn't tell anybody about it for a while. And then like once it worked, then I started telling a couple people here and there. And I mean, for me, I'm a very incremental guy. I don't take big risks in anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I mean, you might try something and it might fail, but you know, if you take the incrementalist approach, so like, you know, if you only take a small step at a time, you only find yourself 1 or 2 steps back. And that's made it easier for me to kind of climb the ladder, as by just taking smaller steps and not trying to do something really big all at once. It's size, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Mm-hmm. And that served me very well. It's like, you know, if I'm not taking a giant risk, then the failure can't be giant either.
Mm-hmm. So that statement that you just made makes me think about what you said just a little bit earlier, where you said like, man, it just seems like nothing is working. Mm-hmm. But even though it may seem like nothing is working, we need to keep working.
Yes.
And we need to continue staying the course and saying, okay, you know, what do I do to keep taking one step forward? And I do think that when we have those people, those mentors, those people in our lives that we can go and say, man, I need you to help me take this step. I need you to help me keep working, because, you know, it's not easy. Yeah. It's not easy. And I saw a meme, this was weeks ago. I think you'll appreciate this, that you probably saw it, but about, you know, like, you know, an employee's mindset a lot of times when they go to bed, mm-hmm. you know, they're just kind of thinking about, you know, just maybe a couple things or whatever. But like if you're an entrepreneur, you're a startup person, you go to bed and you're thinking about like literally a gajillion things, all the emails that you just said, you know, and then if you're a John Acuff reader out there, you know, the whole soundtracks, then you're replaying stuff in your brain, which I'm guilty of so many times, of saying, oh, I should have said this different. Yeah. Oh, why didn't I ask Mac this? Why didn't I, you know, I mean, whatever, right? Yeah. But having those things of just saying, regardless of what's not working, stay the course, keep working, mm-hmm. and then, you know, keep moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you get stuck and, you know, nothing seems to be going ahead. But, you know, what I find is, you know, the other people in our lives can sometimes take a longer view of us than ourselves can. So, you know, you have a mentor say like, well, I know this year's not been great, but, you know, 5 years ago you were doing 20% of what you're doing now. So, you know, in the grand scheme of things, you're still should be proud of where you're at.
Yeah.
And so that I find that to be helpful.
Yeah, that's good.
And then, you know, you don't ever make any runs if you don't make it, you know, don't step up to bat and take a hit. So like in business, you know, I find it's just how many different hits you can take and see which ones land. And like, yeah, you might go 2 or 3 innings and not get on base, but eventually you will. So you got to kind of keep going and keep playing the game.
Yeah.
And I really do see business as kind of a game, because, you know, it's an infinite game that goes on forever, and you can keep playing it, or you can sell your business and quit and stop playing the game. But you know, there's always a next inning. There's always another opportunity that will come along to, you know, you might have scored 0 this game, but like next game starting tomorrow in different industries. So yeah,
that's good. So how is your faith and relationship with Jesus? Because I know, again, you led with that, and I know that's something that's very important to you. And we're going to get a little bit more into just kind of your view of generosity and all of that in a second, which again, your faith is a real guide in that as well. But so how have you seen like your faith and your relationship with Christ really help guide you in, whether it be in business or as you've grown in your community leadership, in your marriage, obviously, in relationship with kids, but explain how kind of just your faith has been such a good foundation and guide for you.
Yeah. So I kind of came to an adult understanding of faith also when I was in college through University Christian Fellowship and West Center Baptist Church in Madison, South Dakota. And I think the 2 things that it kind of really instilled in me in like the business and financial context is, one is really integrity, because there are just so many people out there that aren't trustworthy, and you can't rely on them to do what they say they're going to do. And, you know, just being a person of true integrity and having a solid reputation, just kind of in alignment with, you know, I was telling the truth and doing the right thing, even if it's going to cost me money, or even if it's going to hurt me in some way. I think that, even, obviously it's the right thing to do, but it's also served me really well in business. People in the community know that if I say I'm going to do something, it's going to happen. And that's opened a lot of doors for me as somebody with a track record of reliability and success, and like kind of know what you're going to get. So that served me really well. And that also just kind of the generosity component. There are people that, when you reach the, kind of 8-figure net worth and beyond mark, where they just kind of keep piling it up to keep score, and but your life doesn't really get any better. So then you start to think like, okay, I got all this money, but I still live in the same house, the same kind of cars, same kids, same spouse, same vacations. Like nothing's really changing here. So it's like, why do you keep it all? It's like, then you realize like, oh, I shouldn't keep it all. You should, use it to do good for the people around you in your community. And, but then you kind of quickly realize like, oh, it's really hard to give away 10% of your income when that income's a very large number. Because, there are people in this town where like if they tithed, it would be the entire church budget 2 times over. So like, what do you do in that situation? Or, nonprofits will ask you for a large gift, and then you make the gift, and then you watch them not steward it well. And then you're like, oh, I can't just give a gift to everybody that asks, because they might not know how to handle it or use it well for God's purposes. There was a project in Africa that I funded to the tune of, I think it was $50,000. And it never got finished because it was, I don't know what the deal was. Supposedly like the person doing the construction was like corrupt, and like, I wrote a check and then another check, and then they asked for like another check, and I was like, hold on here. Like I'm not throwing more money at this. And now there's like a half completed project, that just didn't get finished. So that money has kind of been wasted. So you got to be really mindful and thoughtful about who you give money to, what you give them money for. And then like once you're kind of seen as a philanthropist in the community, like every day somebody new is knocking on your door saying, hey, can we meet? I would love for you to learn more about the thing that I'm working on, and see if you're interested in any way in participating. And like, those are good, honest, like requests that come in, but you can't deal with 200 of them a year. Like there's just not enough hours in a day. So we've had to kind of professionalize what we do with philanthropy. We just published an article about it in Sioux Falls Business, where we've kind of taken a percentage of my giving and kind of handed it off to a committee of market beat employees, where we can take applications in. It's a very transparent process. They get kind of judged according to some criteria that we set, and then the company makes gifts based on what the team decides. So when somebody says, hey, I want to ask Market Beat for a gift to sponsor this event or for this thing, it's like, great, here's the website that has all this information. There's a form you can fill out. Our committee will review it once a quarter, and they'll get back to you. Like, this is not a process that Matt, the CEO, is personally involved in. So I've been able to direct a lot of kind of those requests that in direction. And I think it's been good for us because it makes it manageable, but it's also been good for the nonprofits because it just makes it very clear, like what we want to support and what that process is.
Well, it even helps them understand probably a little bit clearer as to what are they asking funding for, and giving them kind of some, I need to probably know some of this information, as opposed to be like, okay, here's this grandiose scheme or this whole, not scheme, but like this idea. But it helps kind of walk them through it. So I think that, because you and I have talked a little bit about just some guidelines and some different things that I think you've probably now been able to transfer even to the company side and Market Beat side, but also just even on the personal end, as far as like things that you've put into place, that I think that I'd love for you to share if you're willing, just because I think it could be helpful for others. Because regardless of what tax bracket you're in, I mean, there's no shortage of needs out in the world, right? And wherever you're listening right now, in your community, in your city, and there's no shortage of good things, like you just said, that you can give to. But it's sometimes, like you just said, regardless of the amount, it's hard to know, like, what do I give to? How do I give? And you and Corrine, and I love that she's been a part of this process, because it's not just Matt Paulson giving, it's Matt and Corine that are giving. And so it's asking the questions like, well, what's near to Corine's heart? What's near to my heart? And all that. So I think if you could just share just a few of the guidelines that you put in place of like, here's how we do it. And maybe some of those same principles people could grab onto and say, I think that could work for me.
Yeah. I would say first, like the local church has to be at the top of the list, because if you're a Christian and you're not supporting your church, you're doing something wrong, right? So that's kind of always the first thing we put down on the giving budget every year. And then after that, it's kind of an understanding of what do we care about, and where are we trying to impact. So there's kind of the personal stuff Corrine and I do. Like, her father is buried in the Emory Community Cemetery. So we write a check to them every year because, we want to honor him and honor the community that she came from and her family that's buried there. So like, it's nothing that checks my boxes, not a huge amount of money, but we do it because it's a priority for her. And beyond that, we kind of use some different judges. An important one for us is like, how long have we kind of been connected to the person? Like, when you ask me for money, I don't care because we've known each other for 10, 15 years.
Right. And
you were around long before anybody knew that I had money. So there's kind of been that history of relationship there and trust. And that's, I also know that, when I invest in RESGEN, like it's going to be spent well. So, I mean, like length of relationship, what is the track record of the organization? Are they, as a baseline, are they a 501c3? Does it kind of check your giving boxes? What's the personal connection, obviously. And then like for people in need, that's kind of a whole nother set of criteria. Because we've had some people, that come into our lives that, have had some pretty substantial needs, and we've helped them out in, let's say, substantial ways. And, with that, you also have to be careful because you can create a cycle of dependence as well, and you don't want to do that either. So you kind of have to understand the cause, what happened, the source of the need, what the current needs are, what they are likely to be in the future. So that happens as well. And, when Jesus talks about, when you give to the needy, don't talk about it and be anonymous. And we absolutely do that in that criteria. But then there are also Christians that say all of your giving should be anonymous. And like, I like that principle to some extent. And some of the giving we do, we never talk about, and that's fine. But then there's also kind of corporate giving that you do, which you do for marketing and advertising purposes. So if you're doing it for marketing and advertising purposes, it probably can't be anonymous. And then there's the issue of nonprofits that will like beg you to use your name because they want you to be associated with their nonprofit. So they want to be able to say, Matt Paulson gave to my organization. So that gives me credibility to ask other people. So it's very difficult to be purely anonymous, like as a large giver. And it's also difficult to do due diligence when you're writing like an anonymous, $500,000 gift or something like that, because you've got to meet with a whole bunch of people, do due diligence, make sure they're going to spend it wisely. So I think the principle is good in general, but in practicality, it like doesn't always work. So yeah, it's something I wrestle with for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think that and you mentioned Corrine a couple different times, because I know that that's been something that you have really great conversations about and that you're involved in. And so, for those that are married, a previous podcast that we had on last season was with Nick Omlid from Pinnacle here in town. And that was something that he really brought up as well, is that he realized that he was writing checks and doing different things, giving, and his wife knew nothing about it. And so he was actually robbing her of some of the joy that came from knowing that she was supporting. And he realized, boy, I need to probably check in with her and find out what are some things that are near to her heart that we could be, participating in as well, that could give that joy. So, and then I love the that whole idea of trust. I mean, you want to be able to, because at the end of the day, we're stewards, right? I mean, we're all stewards of what God has entrusted to us. It's not ours.
No, I mean, and like everybody has to admit that, because when you're dead, like somebody else is going to have the money you have today. It might be your kids, it might be a nonprofit, it might be the government, but like the money, that resources we have today are going to go to someone else. So they're not really ours. Somebody else had them before we did. Somebody else is going to have them after us. So no matter where you are at a faith perspective, you realize like the money I have now, it's like I have it now, but it's not going to be mine forever.
Mm-hmm. And even and I know that really kind of filters in also as you're talking about your time. You talked a little bit about having a full backpack and, choosing what boards am I going to be on, what leadership opportunities am I going to take, all these things, which look great when they're listed on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Got
a great LinkedIn profile.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, is that the best stewarding of our time and our talent and our giftings? Are we utilizing our full gifting on that board? Or because we're maybe taking from our talent and our time that we should be investing over here, and maybe it is a time of quiet. Maybe it is a time of saying, I need to step back. I know like that, with you coming off the seminary board and just something like, you're kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, how do I want these next several years to go so that you can also be fully present for business, but more importantly, even your kids and career and your marriage. So, so that stewardship of time, I know, is such a huge thing too.
Yeah, it's when you're kind of a prominent name in the community, you just get invited to a lot of stuff, and most of it's like good things that like, if a limited time, you'd probably go. But I find myself saying, now I can't go to that, and I say, why? It's like, well, I kind of want to be home with my wife and kids, and I think some people have a hard time understanding like why you can't go to their stuff, and it's because like, well, weekends and like evenings, I'm try to be at home as much as possible. And so that's kind of a unique challenge that you face. And it's I don't know how to deal with it other than just, say, no, I can't be there. And
and like you said, but when you're saying no to something, you're saying yes to something else, and vice versa. When we say yes, we're saying no to something else. And so it's really having us look at, okay, what do I need to say yes to? And what do I want to say yes to? And then what do I need to say no to? And then if I want to say no, maybe there's times where I just need to say no. and that's okay. Even though it feels good to say yes, sometimes it's more important to say no.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we're going to kind of be laying in this plane here. For those of you maybe that were listening at the beginning with the podcast, we have the air show coming up soon. So I think that might have been a little bit of
that was another ask. Somebody said I could spend $700,000 to sponsor a plane that would go around and be an air show. So that was another ask recently.
Could you have ridden in the plane?
I didn't ask. Never got to that point.
Never got to that point. Yeah.
They put your logo on the plane and
Oh yeah. Well, like you said, there's no shortage of opportunities out there. That's crazy. Okay, so I do want to ask. There's a couple of things, but one is, so people would say, like maybe if they looked on socials, or they would just see your name, on this dinner or this thing or whatever. So, but bystanders would say like, hey, Matt's life got to be pretty easy. You're into watches. So like he's got cool stuff and he's got a pretty easy life, but everyone goes through difficult times.
Yeah.
Everybody goes through challenges, right? And I know that you mentioned even at the front end of our podcast, just some health stuff going on with your daughter, and so like, what's been some of the biggest challenges that you've just had to overcome where your faith was like, you know what, I'm so glad I have this foundation in Christ.
Yeah. And I would say it's mostly been on the family side. Our son Micah was born 10 weeks early when I was a seminary student, so he came out 3 pounds, 1 ounces. That was a very challenging time.
I remember that.
Spent 10 weeks in the NICU. When our daughter Addie was born, she wasn't hitting her milestones, and then we started playing musical specialists and just going to see a bunch of different doctors, and we find out she's got a rare genetic condition that less than 1,000 kids in the world have, and it's impacted her development in a lot of different ways, speech especially. So, her childhood doesn't look like a lot of other kids, and she has a full-time EA in the classroom, and it's such a new rare thing that's just been kind of discovered in the last 10 years that like we honestly don't know what her future looks like, and that is a challenge as well. Kareen had a pretty significant medical issue last fall. She was in a hospital for 3 weeks or so, and then just kind of in bed for a month after that. And that was very challenging. I missed our company retreat to Disney World because she was in a hospital, and like that was kind of sucked. But she's doing well now. So we've kind of had our share of challenges. Kareen's dad died 6 months into our marriage. We've been through the ringer, for real, and it's been tough. But you kind of have to understand things for what they are and recognize that God is in control and is kind of the master of our lives and are causing, some of these things to happen, and just hope that, that we can understand He's got a plan for us and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The challenges that we go through, especially with our kids, those are very difficult, right? And they can really take, and even like the loss of a parent that you experienced 6 months into your marriage. And so were there specific things, Matt, that you and Kareen talked about that you did say, like, hey, these could rock our marriage? Like, these are things that could rock our marriage, but we don't want that to happen. Were there certain things that you just said, like when you were a college student, you said, I'm going to take initiative to do everything I can to start this business or make these. Were there things that you took initiative on, even in just your marriage, to say, like, we don't want any of this stuff to sink us?
Yeah. I don't think that was ever the concern. It's like, I think Creed and I would kill each other before we got divorced. I mean, it's one of those things, like, we just don't believe in divorce.
Yeah.
And like, we get into it every now and then and don't always get along. Every marriage, every marriage has their issues, but, I think we just come from the place where, like, we're not stuck with each other, but like we're together from now until eternity.
Yeah.
And just kind of both having that understanding, like there's no out, there's no escape clause. Like, if we're gonna mad, we can just be mad for a while and then we'll apologize and get over it. So coming into marriage with that perspective, like no prenup, nothing like that. Had church marital counseling.
Yeah.
I'm married by a pastor, Randy Tweeden from Central.
Oh yeah.
So like that's been really impactful from our marriage. We've always been part of a local church. That's been encouraging to us. And just, I don't know, kind of always, our family kind of has some ground rules of like, like we've got a lot of resources and we're super successful, but we kind of want to have a normal upbringing for our kids and not like have a house in Paris or anything like super weird that like other people couldn't relate to. So like we live in a pretty normal sized house and the kids go to public school and just kind of trying to create a normal life for them, and has also kind of created a normal life for us. So it's kind of allowed us to like not have anything really weird happen in our marriage.
Yeah. Well, I think that, when you stand at an altar, it's always funny, like you stand at an altar and say in sickness and health, and in richer or poor, whenever we go through challenges, like you really have no idea what you're saying when
correct.
When you're saying,
you don't know what's going to happen.
You're saying, I do. And you're like, let's just get to the dance and then let's get to the honeymoon. Right.
Yeah.
But what you've shown is that regardless of the challenges we go through, we're going to go through together.
Yeah.
And so that's right. I just think it's such an important thing for just couples as a whole to really talk about and say, like, man, we can accomplish anything as long as we're continuing to move forward together. Our eyes are on Christ, and that doesn't mean life's gonna be perfect, because there is no perfect life, there is no perfect marriage.
Yeah.
But we're moving forward together. So that's really good. Well, brother, I'm so appreciative. I really am so appreciative of this conversation, just our friendship over the years, the way you've been such an encouragement to me, and that it's been just a joy to watch you continue to grow as a person, and as a dad, as a husband, and as a business owner and entrepreneur. So, and for you to be willing to come and just kind of hang out with me a little bit here, and so. I want to just ask you, is there any, because you do a lot of podcasts, and one of the things that you and I talked about at the beginning is that we want this to be different. We wanted it to be different than things that, so did we hit on everything that you thought, hey, this would be kind of fun to talk about? Because I want to make sure we hit on everything.
Yeah, I almost said your list of like, I want to cover these things that I never get to talk about. And I think we talked about most of them.
Okay.
So that's good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that means the Lord was in it. And as we were thinking about it, and there was a bunch of stuff that we talked about that wasn't even on this. And so, but truly, I'm appreciative of your friendship. Thank you for being willing to share your wisdom. And normally we end our time with the final word. But there was so much good stuff and then I would just say, and I want to go back and I'll just kind of do your final word for it, because I want to remind people of how we began this. is that, our identity first in Christ, and then our family, and then our business. And what are those things that are going to last forever?
Yeah.
I thought that was something that I'm going to remember for a long time, is our identity needs to be in something that is going to last forever.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's in our relationship with Christ and in our family. So God bless you, brother. Continued success for you and in your family and in business. And I just can't wait to see how God continues to use you.
Yeah, great to be here, Tom.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Matt Paulson today. If you enjoyed the episode and or found it helpful, I encourage you to share with others that may find it helpful as well. If you'd like to connect with Matt or hear more from him, you can find him at mattpaulson.com and on all the major social media platforms as well. All right, thanks again for joining me today, everybody. We'll see you next time for another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others. We'll see you soon.